Welcome to the art scene. I'm your host, Lila Snow. I'm going to start with some early fall shows at American University. On the third floor, they had a Chinese show and a really intriguing piece, which was making a strong statement, but it also was visually interesting, was about the fact that the Chinese built the railroads in this country pretty much. So they have a giant pile of fortune cookies with railroad tracks, and then another huge group of fortune cookies. It was really a very clever idea. In the sculpture garden, they have a mural by Orlando Letelier's son. Letelier was killed in a car bomb along with a colleague in 1976. I knew that his wife was an artist. Well, now the son is an artist, and this was a major event with people coming from the Chilean embassy. On the first floor, there's a show, and I was particularly interested in Tim Davis, who usually does paintings, but he has a piece about housing issues. And he has little white houses. They're so well done, and he's making a statement about housing available to the Black community. That show is called It Takes a Nation. Carol Barsha has had 3 shows very recently. She does very powerful, slightly abstract plants. One is between the real and imagined, and she has plants. She just won an individual artist award from Maryland, so she was in the show that of all the artists who got the award. She also had a show called Birds, Blossoms, and Books, and I found the books particularly powerful. She's really an excellent artist. On to film, and I saw Eyes in the Sky. It has Helen Mirren as a very high-up agent who has to decide whether to drop a missile in Kenya on a terrorist she has been tracking for 6 years. And this terrorist is about to go with 2 other terrorists to a mall and possibly kill 80 people. Unfortunately, so this whole thing is about collateral damage. When a missile or bomb is dropped, you don't see the people. They're just nameless, unidentified people. But what happens is after she gets permission, which has to go very high up the chain because there's a UK citizen and there's an American citizen involved. She gets permission, and then a little girl selling bread goes to the exact spot. And so the planes are waiting and waiting, and she's waiting for permission. And it's really a very gripping film. And the girl sells out the bread and slowly wraps up the tablecloth. It's just torturous. So this really addresses the whole business of collateral damage, which was also addressed in Strangers Drowning, a book I talked about, where you have to decide whether to save 2 strangers or your mother, which is ridiculous because it isn't just the number of people. One of the 2 strangers could be Hitler. And also, I thought about a film that I saw a long time ago called Ace in the Hole with Kirk Douglas. And a man is trapped in a mountain, and he could be rescued by going in near where he landed. But there's such interest in the media. All of the major stations come, and it sort of becomes like Disneyland because whole families come to watch the rescue. They set up a merry-go-round, and so the people in charge of the rescue decide to go in through the top because it will take several days and they can't resist all the attention, and it results in the loss of life. So it's really a lot to think about. Now on to a book, If You Were Here, by Alatar Burke. This is so complicated, just so many twists and turns, and just when you think that you understand it, it does another twist. It's about a couple who haven't seen their friend Susan for 10 years, and then she suddenly resurfaces and disappears because she rescues a teenage kid who steals her phone. It turns out that her phone has a lot of secret important information. And she jumped, this is on a subway platform, and she jumps down onto the tracks, which is very dangerous, and lifts this teenager onto the platform, which takes enormous strength. It turns out, as part of her job, she's very fit. And this is about New York City, West Point, and heroin, and it's very complicated. On to The Divorce Party, that's another book by Laura Dave. And I read this during Hurricane Matthew, and it's about a hurricane. What happens is Nate and his fiancée live in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, which used to be called the Projects. It's really a very poor neighborhood. His parents, on the other hand, live in Montauk, which is the other end of the spectrum as far as wealth. In fact, his parents live in a house, one of only a few that survived a hurricane in 1938. What happened at that time is the tip of Montauk actually cracked off and separated from the rest of Long Island. And so they're used to hurricanes. And they're getting a divorce, and they decide to have a divorce party. They have 200 people coming with a caterer, and they have to move it into the barn. The father says he's divorcing because he's going off to a Buddhist retreat, but that's not the whole story. It actually involves the caterer. So this is really very interesting. And I read Kickback by Robert Parker. I've read other books by him. This is a book about what's happened with the privatization of prisons, and also this privatization of hospitals and old age facilities, which has changed what's happened. And so it's in the interest of the people who run these things to keep the prisoners and the patients for a long time. Kickback takes place in Boston, and there are corrupt judges sending juveniles to very long sentences. And so it focuses around one young man who said something, a little wise guy on Facebook, about the vice president of his school. And he's sentenced to 18 months in a brutal facility on an island off the coast of Massachusetts. And most of the kids do not have, they're told, you don't need a lawyer. Well, this kid's mother hires a private investigator, Spencer, who decides to look into this and finds out about how corrupt the judges are. He goes down to Florida and finds that a couple of the judges own yachts, and so it's in their interest to fill these facilities. This is amusing because the private investigator is also a foodie, so he tells you about every meal he eats, mostly in bars with beer, and so he's like a food critic, which led me to getting a documentary about the Central Park Five, which has been in the news recently because it happens in Central Park in 1989. And what happens is like Jim Crow, the South in Jim Crow days, because these 5 teenagers, 4 African Americans and 1 Hispanic, aged 14 to 16, are tricked. They are put in separate rooms and they're questioned without a parent present until 40 hours. And they're never told they're entitled to an attorney. And what they say to each of them is, do you want to go home? Well, then tell us what you saw the other guys do. So they each rat on the other guys, and they get sentenced. The oldest, who's 16, gets sentenced to 15 years in jail. The youngest gets 5 years, but it ruins their lives. And it turns out the timeline showed them they were throwing rocks. They weren't angels, but they were in another part of Central Park from where the Central Park jogger is found. She was in her early 30s. She was a very bright investment banker for Salomon Brothers. And at that time, Donald Trump took out a full-page ad asking that the death penalty be reinstated for this case. Well, 13 years later, they're exonerated. There's no DNA evidence, and somebody confesses, and his DNA matches that found on the victim. And Donald Trump is still insisting that they're guilty because they were given payment for their time in jail. On to 2 old movies, well, from 2002 and 2003, by Woody Allen. One is called Anything Else. It's vintage Woody Allen because there are a lot of scenes in Central Park where the comedy writer, played by Jason Biggs, talks to his confidant, who is then a 60-year-old Woody Allen. And it's Billie Holiday music, and the writer is talking about the problems with his girlfriend, the girlfriend from hell, Christina, played by Christina Ricci, who thinks she might feel romantic if they go to an expensive hotel, but then she doesn't feel romantic. And so it's really a hoot, and he's considering moving to California. And he has his agent is Danny DeVito, who is absolutely hilarious. So I'll see you next time on the art scene. I'll have something to say about Bob Dylan and the Nobel Prize. This is Lila Snow.